Hello, good day. My name is Richard Byron Cox, and welcome to Module 4 of this our course on the United Nations in general. Today, I want to discuss with you some of the contemporary challenges that the United Nations face, and probably what might be your role in helping to fix these. As you can appreciate, the United Nations was born in 1945. That is more than 70 years ago. And therefore, life has moved on, the world has moved on. And of course, then there are new challenges, new difficulties that the world and we as people face. And how do we deal with that? And what is the role of the United Nations in dealing with all of that? Now, for quite some time, quite a lot of people have been saying that the United Nations need to step up to the plate and do more in dealing with some of these challenges. And one of the first is the institutional changes that some people say are necessary at the United Nations. First and foremost, this is about the Security Council. As you would recall, I told you that there are 15 members and 5 of them are permanent. People have said that we have moved on since the Second World War. The world is a different place, and this Security Council, and in particular the question of the veto, needs to be addressed. How to address that is another matter, but there are those who argue that there needs to be changes, and the institutional structure of the United Nations must reflect some of the new approaches that are necessary to deal with these problems. Now, you might say that's a very simple thing to do. Oh no, it's not that simple. You see, because countries have interests, and when you go to the United Nations, you go there to express your interests. And what might be in my interest might not necessarily be in your interest. So in terms of changing the structure of the United Nations, this is not simple. And the fact is, there is no common agreement. Even if there might be common agreement as regards changes, there's no common agreement as to what these changes are. Or what they should be, sorry. But the fact is that there are many countries around the world who think that there must be institutional changes at the United Nations. Outside of that, there is a key challenge to all of us today, the question of protecting our environment. As I speak to you today, by the end of today, 90 more million tons of earth-warming substances would have gone up to the sky, making climate change worse. As I speak to you, species are disappearing at an alarming rate. Indeed, the estimate is that every 1 hour, more than 4 species disappear from this planet, never to return. Can you imagine that? As we speak, the glaciers are melting at a faster than ever rate before. And we could go on and go on as regards these environmental changes. I know that in some regions of the world, storms have intensified and they have become more frequent. Droughts have intensified and they have become more frequent. And these are just some of the environmental challenges that we face. They are numerous, and these are in the air, on the land, in the water. The oceans are 30% more acid than they were 150 years ago. The ocean is warmer than it was 100 years ago, much warmer. And all of this threatens, the sustainability of our environment. So this is a major challenge. And the United Nations is where all the nations, generally speaking, meet, 193 of them, to discuss all the issues that affect us, both as individual nations and as a globe. And therefore, it is the responsibility of the United Nations to try and tackle some of these environmental challenges. As you know, there's the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. There's the United Nations Convention on the combat of desertification, from where I'm speaking to you, the Secretariat that is, and where I work. And there is the Convention on Biological Diversity, and there's the Ramsar Treaty and others, all aimed at trying to help protect our environment, And so this protection of the environment must be the responsibility of all of us, and there's no better place for us to do this together than at the United Nations. Also, there's the question of human rights. And when we say human rights, it's not just about people being able to march on the streets and shout and do what they want to do or say what they want to say. But it's also about the basic thing as having enough to eat. There's so many poor people in this world today. The basic thing of having a proper education, a proper home, because all of that is your human right. If the basic thing about a right to a proper and decent life, you know, a proper and decent salary, and so on and so forth. And the United Nations, as I said, is where 193 nations come together. And this question is a question, these questions are questions that most of these nations are concerned with. And ordinary people suffer the consequences when they lack these rights. Therefore, it is the United Nations' duty, responsibility, to help in solving some of these. And there is the major question of peace and security. Since World War II in 1945 ended, we have had more than 200 major conflicts in this world. More than 60 million people have died. And conflicts, as I speak, conflicts are still going on and innocent people are dying. Okay? And this is because the question of peace and security still needs to be addressed in a more fundamental way. So this is a challenge that the United Nations must face. And how do we, when I say we, I don't just mean the organization, but we, the peoples of the world who belong to this organization, face this challenge? How do we fix it? And these are just some of them. There are many more challenges. There's the rights of women and children and so on and so forth that needs to be dealt with. Okay? There is a huge amount of environmental challenges apart from those that I have mentioned here, which needs to be addressed. You know, the protection of forests and things like that. How do we stop degrading our land? Because more and more land is being degraded. And we could go on and go on. The environmental health of people, you know, things like that. So there are serious challenges, many challenges which still need to be addressed. And the United Nations, as the body where everybody comes together, need to work on these. But if you think that these can be solved in some offices with a few people in suits like me, then you're wrong. We all have to play our role. And in particular the young, because you are the ones who would lead this globe in the future, would lead the nations of the future. And therefore you have to think, how can I help? What can I do? What is my role in helping to solve some of these problems? This is how this course ends, by challenging you to tell us or to think not only how you can do it, but actually get up and do something, because it's in all of our interests, in the interests of the rich and of the poor, of the small and of the big, that we fix these global problems, because it affects all of us. Take, for example, the question of migration. It's not just Europe it affects. It affects the families of these people. It affects the countries, because many of their young and bright are leaving. So we need to be able to handle all of these questions. And you and I, all of us on this planet, have a role to play. I do hope that you would read the additional materials that we have provided. If you have questions, that you would send these to us so that we can help you. But at the end of the day, remember that this course is important to you, to all of us. Of course, we will give you a certificate of excellence if you get more than 85% on this course. If you get a little less, we will still give you a certificate. But the issue is not a certificate. The issue is you understanding an organization which belongs to you. And the issue is, how can you make an input to make that organization work better for you? I want to thank you for taking this course. I want to thank you for making a contribution now and in the future to making this planet a better place. We are at your service. My name is Richard Byron Cox.